Hello guys, and in this video I'll show you the entire digital character sculpting process from sphere to end. In this video we are going to sculpt this amazing diorama by this concept, which is also will be ready for 3D printing. As you can see, this concept is based on DuckTales cartoon, which is one of my favorite cartoons actually. Don't also forget to check out my Cult3D profile, where you can download this diorama and all my other characters. So I started creating this diorama from Donald Duck because I think he is one of the main characters on this concept. From sphere I created his head using move and clay build-up brushes to create his eyebrows and his eyelid. I also used damp standard brush to create some distance between his eyelids. Next, I added two spheres for his beak, flattened them with Gizmo 3D and inflated some areas to add more volume to it, and applied zero measures so his beak has a nice, clean topology. After this, I created 3 feathers on his head with mask and move brushes. I just masked the area where I wanted to place the feathers and pulled them with move brush. I also did the same process with his feathers on the cheeks. Next, I applied zero measure to his head and refined its proportions with move brush. After this, I also added some subdivision surface to the model and used damp standard brush to add some details to his eyes, and I also extracted his eyelashes so it feels like Donald is very intense, and I also zero meshed them. After this, I used remesh by union to merge 2 parts of his beak and used dynamic topology to smooth the stitch between 2 parts. When it came to creating his teeth, I understood where in DuckTales Donald doesn't actually have them, but they were on concept to create some tans on his face, so I also decided to create them and created his teeth from simple spheres, zero meshed them and duplicated them all over his beak. I also decided to merge them because they look pretty nice when they're merged. When it came to creating his helmet, I just took another sphere and deleted one half of this. I added one more sphere to create the second part of the helmet. I just used move brush to stretch it and zero measure to create a nice topology. After this, I extracted his third part of the helmet and used zero measure because I'm not going to edit this part of the helmet anymore, and I think it's very important to keep topology clean. I also extracted the next part of the helmet and edited it with move brush. Next, I added a cylinder that was going to hold the flashlight, which I created from another cylinder using Z modeler and zero measure. And I also put another cylinder in there that looked like the glass. After this, it was time to create his body. I added a cylinder for the neck and a sphere for the body. I used move brush and dynamesh to shape the body. For this purpose, I used some references which I found on the internet. I also added his tail using 2 spheres and dynamesh, and accidentally I deleted the part of the time lapse where I created his legs and his claws. For the legs, I created 2 cylinders and a sphere, stretched the sphere and merged them all. For his claws, I just used the extract function and move brush. If you want to see how I created them, you can watch the time lapse with Cartoon Dog, because that character has almost the same clothes. Next, I added some folds on his clothes using damp standard and orb cracks brush. Then I extracted the patch on his clothes and zero meshed it. After this, using move brush, I added some more details to his clothes and extracted his button. Then I decided to add some stitches to his clothes and I used standard and orb cracks brush with lazy mouse function. This function lets you draw straight lines. After this, I zero meshed his legs and added more skin folds on it with damp standard and standard brushes. Then I noticed that our character has a bandana, so I just extracted it from the body and added the folds with clay build-up and damp standard brushes. Then I added more details to his body using clay build-up and damp standard brush. Next, I imported my own stylized hand, which I used for each of my character and placed it. After Donald Duck was almost done, I started creating the trolley. I added a cube, sized it, and duplicated. I also added a big cube into our trolley so it's not hollow inside. I added another cube for the metal thing around the trolley. I also used Blender to create the wheels of our trolley and imported it in the brush. I used Dynamesh to fix handguns and applied Zero Mesher to them. I placed them to the scene and added other cylinders as the part of our wheels. I can bend the fingers of Donald hands using polygroups and Gizmo 3D. After this, I added a cube to the scene and tried to make it look like the sand using Move Brush, Dynamesh and Rock Alpha, which I downloaded for free on internet. After this, I zero meshed it and projected all the details from high poly version of it to the low poly version. Then, I started adding more details to the trolley using Orb Cracks brush to create some stretches and trim dynamic to destroy the surface of the object. I did the same process with the metal object of the trolley and with the wood object to make our trolley look very old. After this, I also added some details to the flashlight, and in Blender I created the rails and added more details to them in ZBrush. I also duplicated the boards and duplicated it to create the way out of mine. After this, I added another cube to create the base of the mine and duplicated it to create the mine from the cubes. And I also added details to it with the same technique as with the trolley. After this, I decided to create the rock next to the mine, and I did it with a simple sphere, move brush and Dynamesh, and I detailed it with the same rock alpha as with the sand. After this, I decided to create the diamonds, and I did it with a sphere and a radial symmetry. I created some different variations of them so they don't look the same. I also added a cylinder as a ground. When it came to creating the Huey, I just duplicated some parts of Donald Duck and sized it. First off, I duplicated his leg. After this, I added more details to his clothes. And created his head from a sphere using Move and Clay Build-Up brushes. I also created his eyes from a simple sphere and extracted the pupils with extract function. I also used the same technique to create his beak. I did his tongue with a sphere and Gizmo 3D. I created the feathers with the technique which I showed you earlier on Donald Duck. After this, I placed his hands with Gizmo 3D. When I just copied one of the diamonds and placed it to his hand, I also sized it. After this, I understood that the proportions of this dog were wrong, and I merged all the parts of the character and edited the proportions with Gizmo 3D. Then I created the sack with a simple sphere and move brush. I also extracted more details from it and zero meshed them. I extracted the small part to create the hole in the sack using Boolean mode. After this, I just duplicated the diamonds from the trolley to the sack. As for Dewey, I just duplicated Hugh and started editing him. First of all, I closed his beak and placed his legs right with Gizmo 3D. After this, I created a spade from a cylinder and sphere, and I also changed his hands with Gizmo 3D and polygroups. After this, I started creating the box with the diamonds. I used all the same techniques as for the trolley. When the box was ready, I created the stones with the spheres and move brush. I also duplicated them all over the box. After this, I duplicated Louis and edited his legs, his hands and his face, so he looks like on the reference. I also duplicated the diamond from the trolley and placed it to his hands. When Louis was ready, I started creating Scrooge Mc Duck. I created a new ZBrush file because it's easier to create a big character in a new file, and created the eye sockets with clay build-up brush and edited the eyes with spheres. I also did eyebrows with the same brush and added 2 spheres for his beak and used the same technique that I showed you earlier. I also added the feathers using mask and move brushes. When it came to creating his hat, I used knife curve brush to flatten it and move brush to shape it. I also added a cylinder for his hat and used radial symmetry to create the hat. I also extracted the pupils, added his neck and some spheres for the body. I created his legs from the cylinders and extracted the clothes on them. After this, I just extracted his collar and all his other clothes on the body and zero meshed them. I also extracted his belt and used the same technique. Next, I added his tail with move brush and 2 spheres. I created his hands with simple cylinders and spheres, duplicated and merged them together with Dynamesh. I added folds on it using Dem Standard and Orb Cracks brush. When it came to creating his stick, I just added a cylinder and bent it with mask and Gizmo 3D. After this, I just smoothed it with smooth brush. I imported my stylized hand and bent it with polygroups and stick. I also added some details to his clothes with Orb Cracks brush. Next, I merged his hands with his body and added some folds with Dem Standard brush. I created his glasses with 2 simple cylinders. When my Scrooge was ready, I imported it in the main scene and placed him there, rotated his head. When all the characters were ready, it was time to think about the environment. I started creating it with some stones. I used Move and Trim Dynamic brush to edit them, and I also used the Rock Alpha to make it look like the stone. After this, I extracted some moss on them, so will look more real. I added some diamonds all over the box and zero meshed them. I also put them on the ground. After this, I added some sand next to the rock and did the same process. Then I put some diamonds in the sand. When it came to creating the grass, I extracted it from the ground and detailed it with fur brush and alpha. I also added some flowers and some grass on the rocks so the environment looks more real. Next, I created some grass and put it all over the model. When it came to creating poly painting, I just picked some colors from the main objects and filled every single object in my scene. As you can see, I also used skin shade format cap so the colors look more natural. After this, I added some more details to the colors. For example, I used max by cavity to create some nice gradient on the clothes of this diorama. When it came to preparing this model for 3D printing, I understood that I would end up with many parts, but I didn't expect to end up with 38 parts. If you want to know more about dividing your models by parts and preparing them for 3D printing, I also have a tutorial on this theme, and you can watch it or ask something in the comments below. I decimated every single part so the model has less polygons. After this, I imported my model in Marmoset Toolbag 4, used vertex color to paint all the parts and edit my own background. I also set the light so it emphasizes the shape of the scene and set the roughness for every single part in the scene that I have. And finally, I pressed render button and here's the final result. I hope you like it. Don't forget to download it from the link in the description and see you in the next video.